guys, it's Megan. In today's video, I'll be showing you 10 more art hacks that I actually use. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. The first hack is something that I actually learned from a class on Skillshare, who was nice enough to sponsor today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in art, design, animation, and more. At less than $10 per month, Skillshare is super affordable. But for a limited time, the first 500 people to click the link in the description will get a free 2-month trial of Skillshare Premium, which provides unlimited access to everything on the site. So what are you waiting for? Join the more than 7 million creators learning with Skillshare today. I recently took a class called DIY Stay Wet Palette by Aga K. If you don't know what a Stay Wet palette is, it's a palette that helps keep water-based paint fresh in between painting sessions. In the class, she used a sponge as a base, watercolor paper, and greaseproof paper to make her palette. Since I didn't have any sponges lying around, and I didn't really feel like wasting my watercolor paper, I made my palette a little bit differently. To make your own Stay Wet palette, you'll need a container with a lid, parchment paper, which is also sometimes called greaseproof paper or baking paper, and some paper towels. Start by folding a few paper towels to fit inside of your container. I used about 6 of the half-sized paper towels and folded them in half so that I had 12 layers of paper towel altogether. Run your folded paper towels under some cold water and lightly squeeze out any excess. You want your paper towels to be very wet but not dripping, if that makes sense. Place the paper towels inside of your container and cut a piece of parchment paper to fit on top. Press the parchment paper down onto the paper towels and then flip it over and press the other side down. Now you can add your paint. A bonus hack that I use sometimes is to add a medium to the paint to slow down the drying time when it hits your work surface. This can help make it a little bit easier to blend. I repainted this photo holder thing that my sister was getting rid of over the course of 3 days, and by the time I was done, the paint was just as good as it was on the first day. This would also work really well for those daily painting challenges that I've been seeing everywhere lately. Speaking of painting, another hack that I like to use is to put plastic in between sketchbook pages instead of an extra piece of paper. This is great for a few reasons, the main one being that you won't get bits of the extra piece of paper stuck to whatever you're working on. It's also reusable, which will help to cut back on wasting paper. I got this piece of plastic from some sort of packaging, but if you can't find plastic, you could also use a laminated piece of paper, which you can laminate traditionally or with clear packing tape. When you're done painting, you can rinse off your piece of plastic with soap and water, or use a Clorox wipe like I did here. In my last video, I showed you guys how I made this DIY paintbrush cleaner. It's amazing and I use it all the time, but I find myself leaving the paintbrushes sit in the water for like days if I forget to empty it. It's bad. Since leaving your brushes in water is so bad for them, I attached binder clips to the edge of my water cup to rest the brushes in. This works really well, and you can use different sized clips for different sized brushes. I've talked about using gesso in some of my previous videos. If you aren't familiar with it, it's basically a primer that makes it easier to apply acrylic paint. If you don't want to buy the store brand, you can make your own version using supplies that you might already have at home. To make your own gesso, you'll need white acrylic paint, PVA glue, cornstarch, baking soda, and water. You'll also need something to measure with. I'm using these small plastic shot glasses. First, mix 3 parts cornstarch and 3 parts baking soda and break up any lumps in the mixture. Add in 1 part white glue and 1 part acrylic paint. Mix that all together, and then mix in 2 to 3 parts water, depending on how thick or thin that you want your gesso to be. I added in a little bit of water at a time and tested the mixture every once in a while on a scrap piece of cardboard until I had the consistency I wanted. The finished gesso should look similar to pancake batter. Once you've thoroughly mixed everything together, you can use your gesso right away or pour it into a container with a lid and store it for later. I did a comparison between my homemade gesso and the store-bought kind, and the homemade one works just as well, if not better than the store-bought one. I painted over both of the test pieces with some light pink acrylic paint, and I think that the homemade version actually provided better coverage, probably because of the white paint in it. The homemade version did take a little bit longer to dry, but you can speed up the process using a hairdryer. Just like store-bought gesso, it can go bad eventually if it's not kept in a cool, dry place. You shouldn't have any issues with it once it's dried on whatever surface you're working on, though. There are tons of recipes for gesso out there, and I've tried a bunch of them, but this is the best recipe that I've found so far. It's not quite as rough as the store-bought kind, but that's actually one of the things that I like about it. When you make your own art supplies, it's always a good idea to label the container you put them in so that you know what it is. I made a label for my homemade gesso using a piece of duct tape. I like to write the recipe directly on the label, so I know how much of each ingredient that I'll need if I decide to make more. Here's one last look at the recipe, and I'll make sure to list everything in the description. I like to use a lot of recycled food containers for craft projects, but sometimes removing the label can be kind of a pain. A quick and easy solution is to use nail polish remover to break down the adhesive. Just put some nail polish remover on a paper towel, hold it over the label for about 30 seconds, and then rub the paper towel over the label to remove it. Repeat this process until you've removed the entire label. Any remaining residue can be removed with soap and water. And in about 10 minutes, your jar should be ready to go. Speaking of DIY art supplies, another thing that I like to make is homemade Mod Podge. I personally don't really like the typical version made with glue and water, so instead I like to combine 2 parts white glue with 1 part water-based polyurethane varnish. This recipe allows you to make Mod Podge in any finish that you want. The polyurethane I used had a satin finish, so when it dried it had a texture that was pretty close to matte Mod Podge, but it was slightly smoother. This is by far the best homemade Mod Podge that I've tried. The price comes out kind of similar to the pre-made kind, depending on where you shop, but I still have multiple gallons of glue left over from when slime was a thing, and my dad always keeps polyurethane on hand, so it makes sense for me to make my own. I like using matte Mod Podge to seal the pages in my sketchbook or art journals like Create This Book. This will help to prevent the pages from transferring materials onto the opposite page. Definitely be careful with what you use this on though. It works best over materials like colored pencils and permanent pens and markers, but since Mod Podge is water-based, it won't work as well for water-based markers. I found it a little bit suspicious that the Arteza Everblend markers smeared so much since they're supposed to be alcohol-based, so definitely test this on a swatch before going over your whole piece. I've been using this trick a lot, since one of my goals in my new sketchbook was to put something on the front and back of each page. If you don't seal your pages and the pigment ends up transferring to the opposite page, sometimes it can be removed with an eraser. Don't you hate when you break an expensive colored pencil or you sharpen it so much that it's hard to work with? This can be fixed by making your own DIY pencil extender. All you need is a Crayola Super Tip marker and a kneaded eraser, blue tack, clay, or anything else that will help the pencil stay in the marker cap. Take a small piece of your kneaded eraser and put it on the unsharpened end of your pencil. Put it inside the marker cap and you're ready to draw. I know that not everyone has these markers, but they're a common enough supply that I thought it might help some of you guys. If you use a kneaded eraser, you might notice that some of the eraser is stuck to the end of your pencil when you remove it. Just take the rest of your kneaded eraser and use it to pick up any pieces that are stuck on there. The last hack is more of a craft hack than an art hack, but it is to use Glad Press and Seal instead of transfer tape when working with vinyl. Transfer tape cost about $8 for a 12 by 48 inch piece, so about 2 square feet, while Glad Press and Seal is only $2.64 for 70 square feet. I use this with all of my vinyl projects, and I definitely recommend it. So here are today's shoutouts. If you want a shout out in my next video, make sure to sign up for Skillshare using the link in the description. Remember that the first 500 people get a free 2-month trial of Skillshare Premium. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one, and make sure to follow me on Instagram. It is @WellerMegs. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!